So everybody here, how many people have been in here in business for more than 5 years? How many people have been in business for a little more than a year or less than a year? Less than a year? Okay. So people how many years have you been in Coyote? I didn't get to see your journey.
Just about 5 years.
Okay. All right. So folks are in a different place. This topic of pricing, It it's fairly fundamental, but it's not a one and done thing. I think folks who've been in business for a longer time feel like, okay, I kind of know my pricing. It works. Um, if it works and your business is financially sustainable and you're not burning out, you're happy with what you're getting paid, then it may not necessarily be a problem that needs to be solved. What I often find with clients, especially service clients, clients with service businesses, knowledge workers, which most of the people who find their way into Bradley's community tend to be of this category. You may come to a point in your business, typically it can happen around the 3 or 5 minute year mark. It can take longer to start hitting capacity for if you're doing one-on-one services at least. Even if you're doing one-to-many services, you can hit capacity sometimes depending on your model. And at that point, if you're not really happy with the money that you're making, it sometimes requires us to rethink how we're modeling our business. And pricing is one of the key parts of how we model our business. So I'm going to give you a tool today to help you with that. At the very least, for those of you who've been in the game for longer, it's a chance to audit your current pricing. And I'd encourage you to Mm, if you feel a little discomfort around pricing, then that in itself is data. That's a signal. That's something that we could potentially explore. And I'm going to give you a short exercise today to get into that. So this is a workshop that I actually developed with Bradley. I was up in Salt Spring Island with him for a 3 day, 4 day retreat, and it was amazing. And it was just how y'all have workshops. You all made a workshop with Bradley at some point. It's a pretty arduous process, isn't it? I mean, it's a deeply creative process. It's almost like if you've ever, how many people have been in a band, but I was in a band in a previous life. And it's like creating an album. It's not an easy creative endeavor. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm just going to briefly introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. Um, I founded a business called Livestream Business Services, basically offer coaching and accounting for small businesses. I work here in America virtually. So when I work with folks in the Canadian area, it's really more in the coaching realm since the accounting is significantly different across borders. I was born into a medical family, a family of doctors, which brings me into, the healthcare field. I'm very interested in supporting healthcare folks, but more broadly, conscious entrepreneurs as well. I mentioned this band experience that I had. Most people don't realize, a lot of folks think of a band as like this really sort of like a dream life, right? But, you have four guys coming together in their 20s or 30s, and it's a business. There's a lot of money. There can be potentially a lot of money flowing around. And, making business decisions, money decisions with guys of that age isn't always easy. And yeah, we had a great opportunity. We got signed to Epic Records. We got a video on MTV. We had a song on the radio. We toured the country, but it was a very difficult period of life. And when I was coming across my own money issues in relationship with my business partners, my other band members, I realized I had a tendency to check out. I had a tendency to avoid conflict and to kind of do the ostrich thing of burying my head in the sand. So I woke up to money late in life. I ended up spending 15 years at an ashram in rural Oregon, and they realized I was pretty good at bookkeeping, so they put me in nonprofit finance for 15 years. I ended up starting a bookkeeping business to finance my holistic health training, and now I'm blending those two, helping other mind, body, spirit health businesses to develop the financial infrastructure and the inner understandings to support the right livelihood, making a great living, uh, doing what we love. So I'm gonna jump here. I'm not gonna do the full diagnostic. Really, I would love to just give you one of these. exercises that I think is going to be really um, helpful in laying a bit of an energetic foundation as we step into some of the more nuts and bolts pieces of evaluating our pricing. But one of the key assertions that I make in this workshop is that numbers alone, strategy alone is not enough. Like we see even in the accounting industry, folks who are very high intellect with numbers, with finances, struggle sometimes with their own pricing. That's a clue. It's not just logic. It's not just number crunching. There's a lot more to it. And so I make a case for doing deeper money work, this emotional, softer side of how we approach money, because money is highly emotional, is it not? Right? It attaches to our values, where we place value in life. So I'd invite you here to explore if this is going to be a change of pace. So I'm going to invite you to come along with me here. Uh, Kind of just notice your body, notice your feet on the ground, notice how your body's connecting your seat. Just one of these good old embodiment, grounding moments. And yeah, just noticing your breath, noticing if there's a little bit of a downshift here, if we can get it. Just an aside here, um, we learn better when our nervous system is regulated. We are able to take things in better. We're able to make changes more easily when our nervous system is regulated. So, this is another key part of doing this work. So, as you notice some spaciousness coming into the room, I'd invite you to explore what was one of your earliest memories of experiencing money. And I'll give you an example from my life, just so you can this might help trigger something for yourself, because it may not be so easy to access these memories. When I was first doing this exercise, this is actually an exercise I came across through the work of Barry Tessler. I went through her 1 year course, Art of Money, and it was really helpful for me as basically a renunciate to um, make the transitions I need to make in my own understanding around money to then become a small business owner and entrepreneur. So, um, yeah, when I was thinking back that first time, it took me a few minutes, but eventually I came to this memory of being in um, my childhood bedroom, where I shared that bedroom with my older brother, who was 3 years older, and we both had these uh, jars, these money jars in our closet. And my dad was giving us an allowance for the first time. I was probably 5 years old. My brother was probably 8. And what was great was my dad really placed an importance on teaching us money skills from an early age. So very fortunate in that way. Not everybody gets that, I realize. And he gave my brother a $3 allowance per week. I received $2 per week. My little sister got $1 per week. So we were compensated based on age. No one complained about that. And one day I was counting my dollars and I was so excited about this new money thing that I'd be able to buy these Legos and these Nintendo games. And I saw my brother's jar over there in the other side of the closet. And I was like, wow, he's got a lot of dollars in there. So I looked at his jar and I realized, wow, what if I just take some of his dollars and put them into my jar? I'd be able to buy more Legos that way. And of course, my brother was pretty good at math, and he noticed that my jar was looking pretty flush and this was looking a lot more slim. He reported me to the authorities, my dad, who was not an easy authority to deal with, and I got grounded for the first time. And I took a lot of heat. That was not a fun experience. So the second part of this money stories exercise, what subconscious conclusions and belief about money might have formed as a result of this experience? Yeah. So for me in that case, um, I don't remember exactly what my 5 year old brain was doing, but it could have been something like this. Wow, man, money can get me in a lot of trouble. Money can make me do bad things, right? So, that probably wasn't a conscious thought. That was probably something that was just a conclusion that I made. Yeah. And looking back, so this is the third part, looking back at your life experiences with money, begin to notice how these conclusions and beliefs could have shaped your relationship with money. So, for me, in my this, I think, and it may not have been from this specific experience, but these types of conclusions that were probably floating in my subconscious mind. Money can make me do bad things. Money can make people upset. Money can get me in trouble. I I ended up making some decisions in my teens and my early 20s that were not necessarily in my benefit financially. I would generally avoid. So even, one example is my landscaping company. They wanted to give me a raise because they were happy with the work that I was doing, and I turned down the raise. I was like, "Oh, I don't want to be greedy. Ooh, I don't want to cause trouble." In college, I would be having friends, I would be buying lunch for friends and bringing it to them sometimes. And I wouldn't allow them to pay me back, whereas I probably should have let them reimburse me for that. That was not sustainable for me to do that. At any rate, hopefully that gives you an idea of how to go through this exercise. Let's go ahead, Corley. If you have a way to put up the clock, do you have a clock feature, or maybe I should do it on my? I don't think I can do it on my side with the share. I can just time it.
I can time it, yeah.
Okay, let's give y'all 3 minutes. See if you hopefully you have some pen and paper or something you can type out on a little notepad on your computer. I'll let you have at it. Okay. And generally, what folks find, not all the time, but curious to hear your experience, but sometimes folks can discover that there's a lot here. And, this is just a little 3 to 5 minute exercise. And this might be something that you want to continue to cook on later, maybe tonight before you go to bed or tomorrow morning as you wake up. As we're unpacking some of these things, this can be um, fertile territory for growth and exploration, especially in relationship to growing our business. Okay, so I would love to hear if anybody would feel like sharing their experience with that. I'm happy to kind of facilitate a uh, little dialogue about that. Happy to pass the mic. Hey, Tasha, feel free to come off mute.
Hi. Um, so I'm not going to do a deep dive into the intensity of the trauma that clearly is buried in my relationship with money. But it's interesting to note what I realize is there is a pattern. So the first memory that I have of money was standing in a showroom for beds for my bedroom and falling in love with a brass four-poster bed with the most beautiful lace curtains. And I remember the price tag being £100. I was about 6. I was very clearly given the message that that was a lot of money and it was an unaffordable dream, something I would never, I would never be able to, or we would never be able to afford. Um,
Mhm.
and then I was, because I'm from a military family, I was sent off to boarding school. And I was really aware that it was, although some of the fees were being paid by the services, the rest was made up from my father's salary. And so that I was seeing myself as an investment and that I needed to deliver on that investment in terms of results. And I was always falling short. So I was never, I was never the A grade student. Um, and then interestingly, I spent a long, I had a long time in a role where I was working for a very spiritually focused organization. And what I've realized is that it's almost like I set myself into this scenario where the ethos of this organization, and it was written in, was that spiritual principles took precedence over commercial ones, and that I was in a leadership role in that organization, so I had to fall in line with that ethos, and I had to, my sort of decisions and actions had to be aligned with that. But I was really badly paid in that role.
Mm.
It was, but I think that's a thing, isn't it? This idea of the conflict between sort of spirituality and, spiritual versus material. It's seen as a bad thing. So I've kind of got these reinforced experiences that money is a very negative sort of imprint, and it is something that I struggle with in my business today. There's a
Yeah,
Yeah, so I like, but I mean, it's really clear, isn't it? I mean, that's sort of, you can see why, and I'm aware of it, and I know I need to work through it, and this, in fact, setting up the business and running the business is my way of trying to work through this issues of self-worth and, but it's not an easy journey.
it's
Yeah.
not. It's not. So it's for one, just to normalize. Many of us didn't learn entrepreneurial skills from school, from freemium in college, even for the folks who take masters of business administration programs, they're not prepared for entrepreneurship. It's a whole different ballgame. So most folks aren't prepared for this. And what you named is really, I think, is really important to make it explicit that stepping into conscious business, becoming an entrepreneur is a journey of self-development because it compels us to face some of these things that could otherwise be pretty easy or at least easier to avoid as a salary employee. Yeah. So just to normalize all that, I just want to name a few things that some of these kind of beliefs or statements are a little more universal and even archetypal. Like I'm going to say some of these just kind of extracted from what you shared, and raise your hand if you feel like this might be part of your, she used the word imprint. If you, this might be somewhere in your imprint as well. I can't, I can't afford that. We can't afford that. Yeah. This is an interest. I haven't heard this one before. I am an investment. I need to deliver. That's a, yeah, that's an interesting one. Spiritual principles come before commercial principles. Money is bad, or money is the root of all evil, which is a mistranslation of the biblical verse, isn't it? Yet that's the part we all remember. So it's a nuanced subject. This is a very nuanced subject that we have to shed black and white thinking that money is materialistic and associated with greed, that spirituality is not associated. It's as if these two parts of our world and our brain aren't talking to each other very well. Yeah. So part of our work is building those synapses, bring some integration so that we can move fluidly between financial needs and spiritual needs, financial values and spiritual values. And they're connected. They're connected. There are people who can live off very little money. They, of course, minimize their needs, and they're able to meditate and pursue God realization, right? But they still have a bowl. They still have a bowl that needs to be filled with something, and someone needs to fill that bowl. So they have a very small requirement. Here in modern complex society, we have a much larger bowl to fill. So anyways, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but good on you for stepping into this work, all of you. So any other thoughts, feelings, experiences that anybody would like to share? Thank you, Tasha, so much.
For me, it was a bit curious, Bill,
Yeah.
because from my childhood, I didn't seem, apart from my parent. Okay, so my parents, they were very concerned about money, right? So they were very limited their spending. But I would have little jobs, I would earn money here and there, and I never felt like it really was missing in my life. And then when I started street performing, that was amazing just to get money to come from nowhere and count it all, right? And the only thing I can think about right now is that at a certain point, this was about, well, nearly 30 years ago in Greece, I all of a sudden realized that if I worked all day in a cafe, then I wouldn't hang out with my friends. Or if I had this thing, or time or money I had in my head, and I said time. And I like full-heartedly chose time. And I think,
Mm.
even though I know that it's possible to have both, like to do what you enjoy, right, and not necessarily do a job that you don't like. Still, this thing plays up on me, and so it's a bit strange. So yeah, I'm not actively all the time searching for money. Which when I used to go around washing people's cars when I was like 12, knocking on doors. How can I wash your cars? I had this pretty entrepreneurial spirit of going around, right, knocking up money. So anyway, I think it's coming back, but it's
Yeah.
yeah, so it's strange. Yeah, I find it strange.
Yeah, these decisions that we may have made at certain choice points of our life, that these can also have, it can be a self-made, very conscious decision even that maybe then hangs. And part of this deeper money work is, yeah, we've set the program in a certain way. We've set our kind of compass in a certain way. Sometimes we need to adjust our compass, don't we? Sometimes we need to adjust the program a little. And so, of course, I was living a very choice life of living at a meditation retreat center for 15 years with minimal contact with the economy and money. And of course, I needed to make some changes when I went out and started my business. So I can relate to that. And part of the work that I do with clients, coaching clients, is in the beginning of our engagement. I have them. Some of my clients get frustrated with this because it's not most, coaches or marketing services. we'll really put the gas on, okay, we need to bring cash in. Before we go anywhere, we lay out the values of the business, the values of the individual, because those become, it's not just, of course, if you followed Ted Hargrave's work, the work of making our philosophy explicit, even putting up a philosophy page, that's like the energetic foundation of the business, those principles that guide the business. And it's not just marketing, it's also decision making. When we're explicit on our principles and our values, uh, that helps us with every decision that we make in our business. And every time we're confronted with a challenge, we can anchor back to what are my principles and how will that guide how I make this decision? And the principles aren't always black and white. For instance, one of the values and principles that guides my business is generosity. Yeah. I believe that it's important to be able to give. But yet, at the other side of that, I also believe it's important for my business to be profitable because profitability is what allows for generosity. And so when I'm making a decision about how I price a client contract or how I set a price for a certain project, I touch on both of those principles. So it's not one or the other. Yeah. So again, kind of moving away from black and white thinking into nuanced thinking. I would love to shift gears here and step into some more of the nuts and bolts. For those of you who are coming in a little bit later, we just started with some sort of more, I call it energetic foundation work around money, some of the deeper money work. Now we're stepping into some practical exercises and tools we can use to see into our pricing and figure out what's possible and also to ensure that our pricing is at a rate that's commensurate to what we need to support our current lifestyle or potentially a lifestyle that we'd like to have in the near future. So I haven't been watching the chat. Corley, if I missed something in the chat that's important or spicy, please let me know. All right, so thank you so much. I'm gonna share here. Okay, so if you're fairly new in business, you may not necessarily notice changes in prices and what effect that has on your bottom line right away, right? If you don't necessarily have a lot of encounters, appointments, engagements, whatever your unit metric is for your business. But as you grow, it can have a major difference. And as you set your prices in the beginning, I'll just be honest with you. We're talking about prices. If you're like in the first year of your business, I'll just say it's probably important for you to be flexible. Depending on what you're doing and where you're at, what your trade is, it's probably important for you to be flexible with your pricing in the beginning because in the beginning you just need flow, and when you increase your prices, you're increasing friction. This is a principle that Alex Hormozi sometimes talks about. I like his language in this subject. So really the name of the game as you're developing your offer, you want to get reps under your offer so that you know that you can get transformations through the container that you've created for your clients. You want to get good testimonials. You want to like you want to kindle and initiate that word of mouth referral marketing through getting great results from your clients. And so sometimes even just I've taken many volunteer clients over the years, and I've been generous with scholarships even up to now. I'm in business for 5 years, and I still do scholarships if I see a client who needs help. And especially, some of the key criterion, there is a transactional element to giving scholarships sometimes. We have to be realistic about that. Does this person have access to other people? Or do they have influence with a professional community that could be a hub of potential clients, right? Yeah, are they well connected? Is this a person who can get a great transformation from my services without a major lift beyond what I can extend, right? So I'm diverging a little bit. With that said, that you probably want to be flexible with your prices in the beginning. It's still important to have a benchmark for where my market rate needs to be. And as you get busier, as you get those great transformations from clients and those testimonials, that's the point where you can be more selective about who you give your scholarship to. And you may just have to be okay with saying no sometimes if somebody can't afford your services, or hey, I can't do it for you right now, but I can put you on the wait list for the next scholarship that opens up, or however you manage that in your business. Okay, so with that said, imagine if you're newer in business, imagine you're 3 to 5 years down the road and you're doing between 50 and 100,000 in revenue per year. Way to go. That's like a huge milestone for a small solo entrepreneur business to be able to at least pay ourselves a reasonable paycheck for the work that we're doing. So let's say you're doing 80,000 in revenue year 5 or year 7 or whatever it is. If you increased your prices increase my prices by that much. A lot of folks in the service industry, especially in conscious businesses, tend to underprice their services. That's not a blanket across the board thing. That's just something that I've noticed. And especially if you have colleagues saying, "Hey, you're probably underpricing," that's probably a sign. So let's say even a modest price increase, if you're charging $100 an hour for your and you 25. Clients if you were to raise just that much. Yeah. But there's just from a statistical point of view, there's probably going to be a few who don't make it. Let's say 1 out of 20 can't hang with you. So 5% attrition of clients. The impact that has on your bottom line, I want you to see this. So if you kept all your clients, you'd have $20,000 more per year coming through your business without doing any extra work. Yeah, you're doing the same amount of work. What could you do with $20,000, right? Okay, so I'm going to put back in this 5%. So you lost 5% of the people who might have said yes otherwise. If you're busy, let's say you're like a therapist and you have a wait list and there's people saying no, if you're at capacity, you're not going to have any attrition. It's just going to be different people coming through your pipeline, right? But let's say you lost maybe 5%. That gives you a little bit extra time. And hey, with that extra time, maybe you can spend some time working with Bradley or Ted Hargrave or some of these other folks to build out that next layer of your business model so that you can move a little bit more away from the trading time for money thing and more into something that's scalable for your business. Okay, so who knows the 3 ways that you can grow your income or revenue for your business? Yeah, anybody remember these? I'm pretty sure Tad mentions this. I'm pretty sure Bradley mentions this somewhere along the way. Okay, one is increase your prices. That's what we're talking about now, right? The other one is what? Go ahead,
Work
Tasha.
more.
Say that again, Anthony.
Work more.
Work more. Work more to what? What do we need to get more money in our business?
More,
What's that, Coyote?
either more clients or more money per client.
Okay. Yeah, the more money per client. Yeah. Okay. Both. So that's actually 2 things. Let's break it down. So more clients, so lead generation, more people that we're serving, more contracts, right? That takes what? That takes work. It takes work to go out and do the marketing to get more clients, doesn't it? Yeah. More offers, more launches, more advertising. And that other piece, more money per client, maybe re-engaging the same clients for more services. Yeah. That also takes more work. You're doing more services in both cases. Whereas, this is just, I'm not saying pricing is the only way, but pricing generally is the path of, it's less work. Let's just say it that way. And it goes directly to the bottom line. There's no extra work involved other than upgrading, your website and your your sales materials, but also there's no extra expense as with online straight to any that you can potentially take home as if let's say you're only at $20,000, you increase by 20,000, you increase by 25%, it's an extra $4,000 a year. So even if you're not, a big baller quite yet in your business, this can still make a pretty major impact. And let's say it's a 50% increase. That's more drastic, I would say. But for some folks, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend making that jump right away. There are techniques that you can use to roll out a price increase, and it may actually require doing some of the good old Ted Hargrave work of getting really clear about who you're serving. Yeah, because if you can get really clear who you're serving and what value you're adding to their lives, you're going to be able to communicate that value to those folks who are able to pay you 50% more. Okay. Was that helpful? Is this helpful so far? Yeah. So this is getting into the reverse engineer pricing template. I'm actually going to pop both of these links in chat for y'all, so you can have them. And you'll want to do the good old Google Sheet thing of going to file and making your own copy so you can work with the template. Okay, so I'm going to throw this in chat. This is the pricing diagnostic. There's that in chat. I would recommend bookmarking that or copying and pasting that somewhere in one of your digital notebooks somewhere so you can have it and refer back to it. If you lose it, feel free to email me. I'm in Bradley's community. You can try to message me there too, but I don't check my Majik Mind Mighty Networks very often. So this is the other notebook, and this is the reverse engineer pricing template. I'm just going to abbreviate it, reverse engineer your pricing template. There's that. So if you have two monitors, I encourage you to open this up on maybe one of your monitors, or if you have a tablet or something. I don't think you're going to be able to look at this very easily on a phone. Feel free to do so. And if not, maybe just kind of, if you have a pad of paper, you can kind of like do the paper and pen thing with crunching some of the numbers here, but it's only going to get you so far. And you'll see what I'm saying. So what do we actually need to be charging in order to support our lifestyle based on how many people we want to be seeing per week? And, I'm pretty sure Bradley has done this work at some point with y'all, maybe in the business planning exercises. How many people have an idea of what their capacity is? Yeah. Like
I
how
don't know
many?
what you mean by capacity.
Okay, great. Thank you for asking. That's an appreciated and brave question. There's no dumb questions here. So capacity is how much work can you perform per week or per month? And depending on your business type and your business model, that may mean how many clients can you serve per week, per month. That may mean how many group programs can you do per week or per month. In other words, okay, I have, let's say, a typical work week of 40 hours of work hours. And for me and my business, half of those are doing other things in my business, whether it's running the business behind the scenes, doing professional development, gaining more skills, doing training, marketing, having sales conversations, having networking conversations, showing up and teaching with partners like Bradley. So there's a lot of things that I'm doing that aren't directly revenue generating services. Yeah. So I would argue that marketing is a revenue generating activity, but if it's not paid marketing, In other words, if it's not something I'm getting paid for, it's not directly a revenue generating activity. So that means 20 of my other hours generally go toward service deliverables for my contracts, whether it's doing bookkeeping, coordinating my team for my bookkeeping clients, whether it's hopping on calls with my coaching clients, whether it's reviewing exercises and offering comments on the exercises for my coaching clients, whether it's tending to messages with my coaching clients via Slack. So those are all part of, they're not necessarily, all those hours aren't necessarily on calls with clients in my business model, but they're hours that are dedicated to fulfilling client services. So let's see. Let's throw it in chat. This will be a great exercise. What do you think? How many hours per week? Have you all done with this, Bradley? This with Bradley or no? How many hours per week are you going to be? Okay, so this is a quick capacity exercise. It's quick and dirty. You don't have to think too hard about it. Just an estimate, and it can be a range. How many hours per week do you dedicate toward your business? Number one. How many hours per week in general do you spend fulfilling client services or client deliverables? When we say deliverable, it's like work performed to fulfill a contract. Go ahead and throw that in chat if y'all would.
Is the question
So a business would look like, and that help us exercise. And then, of course, in the course of growing, it's helpful to know where we're at and what we're growing into, right? But when we're setting our prices, we need to set based on what we want to be in the in our business. In other words, charge need money. We want to price it based on where we see ourselves being in a sustainable orbit business. So Anthony, thank you. Okay. Anthony, how often do you do a retreat? Once a month or once a quarter?
Yeah, I would say once a quarter. I'm not doing once a quarter, but that would be my yeah, it would be more than one quarter perhaps.
Okay, yeah, maybe in a you a slow, not performing just a service model business. Exercise still be valuable necessarily an idea need to earn hour. So when probably working 8 and 12 hours a day, 4 hours a day, sometimes during those retreats, depending on how much you have. You, this is my approach and suggestion at least. An idea. Yes. Like one is that your price tag is only allowing you to get paid $15 an hour for all that work you're putting in. Got it? So if we break down the metrics, and I would suggest one of the key things for that second layer of work, for that to work, when we're figuring out the pricing of a service like a retreat, this is going to sound like a pain, or it might sound like a pain, but we want to count our hours. It's important to have a log of like how many hours we're actually putting in work to making that happen. And of course, if you have a team, if you have contractors that are helping you deliver on a retreat or a group programming experience, we of course want to be tracking that as well. But that's going to be in your books. That's going to be a little easier to track since you're paying those guys with a check or with a payment. Okay, so great question, Brianne. What is capacity? Let's dig in. Okay, so first piece here Anybody? Okay, so just feel free to come off mute if you do have anything. Otherwise, I'm just gonna keep rolling here. This is a framework that I've also borrowed with permission from Barry Tesler. That our lifestyle isn't necessarily a fixed thing. Remembering back to even some of these imprints of voices that can be in our subconscious, like, I can't afford that, we can't afford that. Noticing that, just noticing that that's there is already more than halfway into the solution because those things control us when we don't notice that. Yeah. So this exercise will challenge you. It will challenge you to break a little bit if there's a little bit of an earning ceiling. Yeah. Sometimes there's earning ceilings that we may have inherited even generationally, based on, beliefs that we may have been explicitly or implicitly what we've inherited from our parents. Yeah. So I would encourage to start mapping out your comfortable income. These are 3 lifestyle tiers. If you're in the beginning of your business, then you probably also want to map out your survival income because you may have to scrape up for at least a few months, maybe a couple of years to, invest as much as you can into your business. Yeah. If you have a lot of savings, then maybe you won't have to, right? But if you are living off savings, if you're living off a loan, if you're living off credit card debt, any of that, all of which I've done before, by the way, you want to have an idea of what your runway is. So your runway is how long you can keep going with the amount of money or the amount of credit line that you have. Yeah. And without running out of cash. Okay, so survival income, you have your comfortable income, and then, if you've already mapped this, it can be a really helpful exercise to map out your expansive income. So what if you didn't have to say no to things? What if that voice, I can't afford that, we can't afford that, became irrelevant? What if you didn't have to even think that anymore? So, living your dream, what would that look like? And it can be unrealistic even. This can just be a thought exercise, yeah? Or it can be realistic. What would it look like if you were making twice as much money, right? So very basically, you'll see lines here. Can everybody see okay, or should I zoom in a little bit? I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so it's a little. So for the comfortable income, we will just go line by line. You'll see that I put 2,000 for housing utilities. Maybe I'm doing 600 for food per month, clothing. Since I already have this mapped out, so you can kind of get the idea of what this is. Basically, each row is like one kind of type of expense that you probably have as a householder. There's some lines here for other expenses that aren't explicitly stated or included here. Just real quick, I'm just going to walk through doing a survival income. Let's say you only need maybe 1,500 for, let's say 1,200 for rent and utilities if you got a pretty good deal. Here on the west coast of the US, that's not that easy to find, believe it or not. So food, let's say you're able to get by on 300 a month for food. Clothing, you don't need much. Maybe you're really scraping by and going to thrift stores, whatever you got to do. Let's say living essentials and toiletries, 25 a month. Healthcare, we want to make sure you can get your teeth cleaned. So let's say at least 100 a month. Entertainment and hobbies. So you get the idea. You kind of basically fill out the rest of this, 100 per month. Let's say you take one big trip a year, two big trips a year. Vehicle. Okay. And things like this, contribution to savings, you're probably not going to have that in your survival income unless you're required to contribute to some kind of account in order for it to stay active. personal debt payments. You know, if you're working with credit cards to get your business started, then, or if you have personal debt, say a student loan or anything like that, you want to make sure and include that there. You got property tax, insurance, lots of different categories. So what you're going to find is you're going to get a total, and then you're going to, based on that, you know, here in the US, self-employment tax is higher than just a typical employee because you're paying taxes for both you as an individual and for your company. So, you know, generally a conservative estimate would be about 35%. If you're not earning a ton, it's going to be a lot lower because, you know, I'm just going to throw around these terms. You're going to have a standard deduction that pulls out of what you're getting taxed on. So if you're only earning, let's say like 15,000 a year, you might not even necessarily need to pay taxes in the US because of that standard deduction. But at any rate, this is going to give you an estimate of generally what you should be saving. I would recommend working with your tax professional or a tax professional to get a clearer idea of what this should be. And then basically after taxes, you know that based on these living categories, and based on a little bit of tax on top of that, you probably need to be making about $2,500 a month. So let's say that you're living off savings. This is what we call your burn rate. This is how much you're going to be burning of your savings every month just to be able to support your own living. And this does not yet include business expenses. So based on how we have this calibrated so far, we have a survival income of about 5,800. We have a survival income of 1,850. With taxes, it means close to 8,000 and in monthly income, and 2,500 for surviving. It's about 30,000 per year and about 94,000 per year for comfortable. 30 for survival, 94 for comfortable. Now, the second step here is to look at what are our business expenses. Okay, so how many people are doing any form of bookkeeping for their business at this time? Yeah. Are y'all using QuickBooks or Wave or spreadsheet? How are y'all tracking your finances? Feel free to come off mute and let me know.
I use You Need a Budget mostly,
Okay,
as
wonderful.
well as self-employed QuickBooks, but I don't really use that except for just kind of doing taxes at the end of the year. Mostly it's YNAB.
Okay, so are you using YNAB both for your business and personal?
Yeah, yeah.
And do you are they mixed for you, or do you have separate programs for each?
Separate. Yeah, I'm a YNAB certified coach.
Hey,
Yeah, I went through that program, and yeah,
okay.
so I have two budgets.
Okay, so this is right in your wheelhouse. And you could probably teach me some things here if you see something that's like, hey, we do it like this, then feel free to chime in here. But wonderful. So, you know, this is familiar territory for you. And way to go. So if for everybody, if you didn't catch that, it's going to be a whole lot easier to track your business finances if it's separated out from your personal. I'm sure you've probably heard, you know, that we don't want to commingle those, but sometimes it's easier said than done for folks. So I know it can be a challenge. Okay. So we have YNAB. We have a couple other people doing their bookkeeping, just so it can do a temperature check of the room. Who else is doing their bookkeeping again? Yeah. Spreadsheet? Okay, spreadsheet. So that's great. Way to go. If you're not doing your bookkeeping, it's probably smart to at some point get into a rhythm with that, at least a monthly rhythm, if not like a weekly rhythm, just so it doesn't become a huge, overwhelming, stifling pile of work at the end of the year. And it will also give you some financial clarity into how things are actually moving in and out of your business. So if you're doing your bookkeeping, this exercise is going to be easier. You'll want to know what your monthly expenses are. And if you're not sure what those are, just look through your credit card statements for your business. Look through your bank statements. And if you're not sure how to do that, then let me know. I'm happy to show you, but hopefully you got that piece down, that you're able to sign into your banking app or your online portal. Okay, so monthly expenses, a lot of business expenses are monthly recurring expenses, so you want to list those down. For things that are more one-off expenses, what I encourage you to do here, things like office supplies, office expenses, just create like a rough estimate based on what you spend per year. So if you've done your books and you have like your tax return for last year, you have a profit and loss from the previous year. What you can also do is just put everything in annual expenses in this annual expense area, what the total budget was for, say, or total spend was, say, for office expenses. Let's say it was 240. You could put that here instead of up here. Okay. I'm going to undo that because I don't want to confuse folks with the template. But that's essentially what you're doing. Once you add up these monthly expenses and this formula, so this formula is going to add up those monthly expenses. It's also going to add the annual expenses, but it's going to divide these by 12 through this formula. What you're going to see is that you're going to have a rough monthly budget. So again, this is your burn rate for your business. So again, now we're looking back. We need about $2,500 for survival income per month. And our business is going to chew through about $1,700 a month based on, spending $1,000 per year on like, different business licenses, etc. 500 a year on insurance, all these other things. Okay. Step 3. This is where we see it all come together. Remember how I asked you in the beginning about capacity? This line here, line 7. This is where you'll indicate what you want your capacity to be. You know what? I work with a lot of therapists. Most therapists, they don't necessarily want to see more than 15 one-hour appointments per week. And, it sounds like, wow, 15 a week. There's a lot of work that goes into making sure that you can have a container that allows you to see 15 people per week. Again, there's marketing, there's business operations, there's managing your business finances. And, not every therapist wants to be working 40 hours a week anyway. And, clinician burnout is a real thing. So this is, there's a big energetic and emotional weight that comes with doing that kind of work. If you're doing coaching work, you probably have that in some shape or form as well. So this is where you'll determine how many client hours you can do per week. So if you're a coach or a therapist or a service professional doing one-on-one appointments, you can say, you can say your unit metric is 1-hour appointments. If you're like Anthony, you have a retreat business, I would say how many hours you're doing for services per week, or how many you want to allocate to services per week. And if it's variable, like Anthony's business model, where you're doing retreats some days of the month, or some periods where it's going to be a lot more intensive work for a short period of time, and then you're going to have some space between it, just pick an average. If you can have a range, you might make a note here of what that range is. You can insert a note, range, right? Let's say like 15 to 25, but 15 is generally going to be the norm, right? I'm going to delete that now since this is the template. Okay, then I don't think a lot of you have direct costs per client. If you're running a retreat, you are going to have direct costs, or otherwise the accounting term we use for that is cost of goods sold, or abbreviated as COGS. Anthony, that for pricing a retreat, I would give you another exercise for that. We can potentially get into that today. And do you have other revenue streams? So for instance, a great luxury for a business owner to have is, if you have an Airbnb, or maybe you have a part-time gig that brings in money in another way, or even greater luxury, you have a partner who is able to support you with their salary while you're getting your business going. And once your business is going, you might be making more money than their salary. But if you're able to use that to help support you, that's definitely going to make it easier to lift off a business. That could be family support income, that could be Social Security, that could be anything. So if you have other revenue streams, you'll list that here because that's going to have bearing. If that's regular income, that's going to have bearing on what you need in order to support these lifestyles. Okay, any questions so far on capacity or other revenue streams? The formulas are set in this that they're pulled from the other sheets. So, and
Okay.
I'll explain what's happening here. Now that we've had this set out, these are the other two anchoring points. Now that this
Okay.
is laid out, we're going to see the minimum viable owner compensation per month. This is what you need to be bringing home per month in order to support these incomes. That's what we saw in this other sheet down here, right?
Okay.
Okay. Based on working 15 client deliverable hours per week, in order to support the survival income, it needs to be at least 60 per hour. To support a comfortable income, we need roughly about 150 per hour. When I say per hour, we're talking about these 15 client deliverable hours. And so this is key for especially folks like therapists who like maybe you've been hustling and maybe you're on the cusp of burnout and you need to look at reworking your pricing. And I've worked with therapists who've made the jump from being on insurance panels where you'd maybe getting 110, maybe up to 130 per hour based on insurance reimbursements. I should say per visit or encounter, not per hour. And it's a big jump to go from that to then say, hey, I'm going to charge $200 cash pay per client, or 250 or 300, right? And I have therapists who are doing each of those price points, right? So doing this exercise and having an idea of what you want your business and life to look like energetically, and this is coming back to that energetic foundation, knowing what you want your life to look like, it makes it a lot easier to step into, okay, and I need to charge this price because all these other things in my life are important to me. And I need to hold that while I'm also feeling the tension of my clients who perhaps aren't able to meet me at that price point. And if they're not able to meet me at that price point, how can we make peace with that? And you have referral partners who are on insurance panels or who have a lower price point for cash pay, where you can send them to somebody and know that they're going to be well cared for. And at the same time, being clear on who is best suited to work with you. And so that, that's just in general. That's not necessarily for you in particular here in this scenario. But hopefully everybody here is able to kind of see themselves in that in some way of like, yeah, it's not easy to raise prices for folks who you care about and want to serve, right? But it is, it's this relational piece of being able to hold our needs next to the needs of those that we're serving and not collapse into their needs without upholding our own. Yeah. Okay. So Tasha, question. I'm happy to answer questions. You guys can play with this on the side too.